I am so over billionaires trying to cosplay as average working class Americans. Taylor Swift wants to say that she's our English teacher. I think that's very interesting because my English teacher doesn't have a net worth of $1.6 billion. And I don't know anybody whose English teacher has a net worth of $1.6 billion with a B.
So, that was writer Carrie Corrigan discussing Taylor Swift's recent engagement announcement, and frankly, I think it's hard to disagree with her. As soon as the announcement dropped, I was immediately hooked on the Discourse, but before we get into all of it, I should probably start with a disclaimer. Listen, I think there are many valid reasons to condemn Taylor Swift. We're going to talk about some of them in this video, but I want to make it clear there are certain things I'm not saying with this video. I am not saying you are a bad person if you like or listen to Taylor Swift. I am not saying Taylor Swift is a bad musician or even strictly a bad lyricist. Sometimes she can certainly be a bad lyricist, but we'll get to that. But fans of the channel will likely remember when I held up Taylor Swift's lyrics as an example of how poetic songs could be. If you've ever been in a high school English class, you've almost certainly seen an English teacher use song lyrics to teach literary devices. In fact, if you are an English teacher, I'd wager it's likely that you have used Taylor's lyrics in class before. I honestly feel bad for Taylor in a lot of ways. I cannot imagine having as many eyes on me as she does, all the stalkers, AI users, right-wing bigots, and even the president himself going after you. It sounds like a waking nightmare. So if you're a fan of Taylor Swift, I hope you'll afford me the same grace that you would want others to give her. I know I'm not above criticism, but if you want to criticize me, please actually engage with the arguments I and others make in this video, and don't just write me off as a sexist or a hater. With that out of the way, let's get into it. I want to explore Taylor's statement here. Your English teacher and your gym teacher are getting married. I want to really get into the weeds. Why she probably chose this caption, its many responses, and my trains of thought about the whole thing. You might think I'm reading way too much into this, but as always, that's what I do around here, and I won't apologize for it. So why would Taylor Swift call herself an English teacher? Well, to someone like me, someone who's not a Swiftie but likes most of her hits, it just reads like a joke based on appearance. On the surface, Travis does kind of look like a stereotypical gym teacher, and Taylor does kind of look like a stereotypical English teacher, but only in the sense that she's a young-looking white woman. The stereotype of young women teaching English is so prominent that it's become a meme to note how often English teachers seem to get pregnant. As someone who went through an English teaching program in college, I will acknowledge that a lot of my peers were young white women. In fact, in my children's lit class, I was the only one in the room who identified as a man. In my own middle and high school career, I had 5 English teachers, 2 of them younger women, 1 of whom was actually pregnant, and 3 of them older women. But as with many stereotypes, this is just a generalization. There was such a wide pool of people in my English teaching program, and during my time as a student teacher, I got to work with a diverse array of educators. And let's be honest, even Taylor Swift's fans can agree that everything she does is very intentional. So to just write the post off as a mere joke, I don't know, I think there's more to it than that. As it turns out, Taylor Swift being an English teacher is apparently a thing among her fans. I already noted that I'm not her biggest fan, but I had never heard this before. I even asked a friend of mine who's more plugged into Swift stuff than I am, and she'd never heard about it either. Thankfully, multiple articles were ready to explain things to me, like this piece from the Hindustan Times. Swift's admirers claimed that she had English teacher vibes long before she even began dating the 35-year-old NFL star. Her frequent literary allusions in her songs over the years, such as Romeo and Juliet and Love Story, are one factor contributing to this. She makes reference to Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter in other parts of her song New Romantics. Oh, I see. So she gives English teacher vibes because she makes allusions to some of the most widely read books of all time. Okay, that's not fair. Allusions don't have value based on how obscure they are, and I know for a fact Swift has made better allusions than these. But what I'm trying to say is, most songwriters know how to craft a literary allusion, among many other figurative devices, and you don't see everyone out here calling them English teachers too. I took a look at a few other articles from the National Post, Mint, and Unilad, and all of them make mention of the literary allusions in Love Story and New Romantics, and all of them cite either one or both of the same tweets. It's almost like they're all getting their information from each other. Amazing work. Journalism is alive and well. Sorry, I'm being mean, and a bit of a hypocrite, to be honest. I'll also note that there's an interview where Taylor says if she could teach one subject in school, it would be English. And just because I had never heard Taylor referred to as an English teacher before the post doesn't mean it never happened. But I do want to mention one more thing. Some folks point to the song So High School as justification for this. It's even the song that Taylor used in her Insta post. But I gave that song a listen, and Taylor is clearly comparing herself to a student, isn't she? Isn't she saying that her relationship with the song's subject makes her feel like a teenager? I also find it kind of funny because I do remember people clowning on Taylor for these lyrics specifically. Regardless, this, to me, is the most obvious way to read Taylor's Instagram post. The most charitable reading is that it was just a joke, but it wasn't just a joke. It was a very intentional way for her to further endear herself to her fans. On the one hand, that's fine. She should be allowed to engage with her fans however she wants, as long as it's not inappropriate or predatory or manipulative, right? So why did people have such a problem with this choice? Well, we should certainly address the billion-dollar elephant in the room, shouldn't we? When the engagement post hit r/faux-moi, one of the top comments noted, "My English teacher wasn't a billionaire." And this is what Carrie Corrigan was getting at with her Instagram post. I'd like to play what else she had to say, as I think it's very well said.
According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average annual salary for a public high school teacher in America is $64,500 a year. That is 25,000 times less than Taylor Swift's net worth. And according to the National Educators Association, the average annual starting wage for a public school teacher in America is $46,500. Oh, and they also found that with inflation, public school teachers make about 5% less on average per year than they did 10 years ago, which is so cool. So if you are our English teacher, Taylor, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and actually fund education? Why don't you donate large sums to underfunded and understaffed schools and teachers? Why don't you speak out about illiteracy or about the dismantling of the Department of Education or about student debt? Because, you know, you love English, you love education, you're the English teacher. You're not, because you're not one of us. And you continue to insist, billionaires continue to insist that we accept them as one of us, but they are not only not one of us, their active hoarding of wealth is what makes our lives so hard. There's just a fundamental disconnect. So to say that you are our English teacher while you're hoarding wealth and doing nothing to help the lives of actual English teachers, I find it disingenuous and disrespectful.
There are honestly so many great points there that I find it hard to address them all. I think what resonates with me the most is how Taylor could be using her wealth and influence to help educators right now, to help the country right now, but she isn't. This is part of what we mean when we say there's no such thing as an ethical billionaire. Although, funnily enough, I am reminded of Dolly Parton, who isn't quite a billionaire but still has a staggering net worth. You know what she does with her money? She promotes literacy among children with her imagination library, gifting hundreds of millions of books to millions of kids across the country. And you don't see Dolly calling herself an English teacher. And before anyone says it, I know, Taylor is not without her charitable efforts. In fact, in 2011, she reportedly donated $70,000 in books to her hometown library, 6,000 individual books geared toward children and teenagers. And she hasn't stopped donating to individuals and causes since then. Still, with her wealth and influence, she could be doing so much more. And I'm not trying to single her out because every billionaire is in the same boat. She just happens to be the topic of this video. Corrigan also made the point that Taylor is cosplaying as someone in the working class, trying to portray herself as one of us. Again, I have to agree. Folks on Reddit pointed this out too, how Taylor has long wanted to portray herself as the nerdy underdog. And when thinking of underdogs, it's hard to think of people who have more of an underdog status than public school teachers. But again, that ties back to the financials of it all. Teachers are partly perceived as underdogs because they do so much for so little. I'm not saying Taylor doesn't do a lot, but whatever she does, she certainly doesn't do it for a little. And that too is where part of the criticism comes from. Maybe it's wrong to compare two careers as different as pop musician and English teacher, but the fact is, teachers put in so much work to get to where they are. Even after finishing the schooling and the student teaching, it's not like full-time teaching is a cakewalk. There is so much strife and sacrifice and turmoil in being a teacher. And teachers do it for a pittance, basically. I never even became a full-time teacher after getting my degree. I couldn't hack it. While I love to teach, there's so much that goes into teaching beyond just teaching, and I wasn't strong enough for it. Teachers are genuinely some of the most resilient people in the world, and they are not at all adequately compensated for everything they do. And please, don't misconstrue me. I'm not saying Taylor didn't work at all to get to where she is, and I'm not saying people who don't go to college can't be smart or driven. But in Taylor's case, In this scenario, it sounds like she wants the title of an English teacher without everything that actually goes into being an English teacher. All of the pros with none of the drawbacks. On the r/teachers subreddit, someone made a post saying Taylor calling herself and Travis teachers is stolen valor. And while the post was made in jest, a lot of people actually agreed with the sentiment. It's honestly kind of funny seeing someone try and use teacher as a title to boost their status. Who knew being a teacher would give you so much clout in 2025? And that's where we get into the rub of this whole thing, the major thought I had when I first saw the announcement. I honestly think Taylor really wants to be seen as an intellectual beyond her music-making capabilities. That, I think, is a big motivator in titling her last album, The Tortured Poets Department. She wants to be seen as a high art wordsmith. While writing this video, I came across this article from Tara Majuli of The Rec Room on Substack. This article was cathartic in many ways, even though it was maybe a little too snarky, maybe a little too judgy, maybe a little too mean, but so is this video, isn't it? I want to highlight a few quotes. Do you know what would actually convince me, a writer, that Taylor Swift deserves the title of our English teacher? If she had some kind of meaningful presence in the literary world. If she got involved in political causes that fought book bans. Maybe, and hear me out, if she actually read books. Majuli then goes on to discuss a growing celebrity presence in literature, some of it more authentic than it would at first seem. As an aside, this article reminded me of Mina Lay's video Book Talk and the Hot Girlification of Reading, which is another great watch. But anyway, Majuli compares Swift to Dua Lipa, a celebrity who has made her love of reading very clear. Dua Lipa even has a book club that, quote, aims to highlight books that aren't on the typical bestseller lists in order to better support debut writers, new voices, and overlooked/underrepresented stories. Taylor, on the other hand, doesn't have a book club, and as Majuli says, that would be fine if Swift didn't refer to herself as an English teacher. She did start her own publishing company, but really only as a means to publish her own book outside of any established publishing house. Majuli also spends a good portion of this article talking about Swift's underdog status, comparing her self-presentation to that of a Disney protagonist, an awkward, cat-loving, nerdy bookworm. And as many other people pointed out online, Taylor's present-day situation feels a lot like the You Belong With Me music video, or at least the way Swift is trying to present it. The awkward, nerdy underdog ends up with the ruggedly handsome, athletic Prince Charming. In reflecting on Taylor Swift's influence on poetry, and vice versa, Majuli writes, "Some have praised Taylor for bringing poetry to the mainstream with the release of the Tortured Poets Department. Sure, with authors like Rupi Kaur and Eliza Grace being at the forefront of contemporary poetry, we need all the help we can get. However, Taylor never really championed the art, or even delved into how it informed her work beyond inspired cheap Bukowskian imagery of winos and typewriters. Then, surprise, the moment the TTPD era was over, she never mentioned poetry again. In her Rolling Stone interview with Paul McCartney, Taylor said that when writing Folklore's lyrics, she chose to use bigger, flowerier, prettier words such as epiphany, elegies, and divorcee, just because they sound beautiful. She also said that she keeps lists of these beautiful words to use in future songs. For example, one such word is kaleidoscope, which she whipped out for synth pop offering Welcome to New York.
The fans have a really amazing inside joke where they're like, what, like the starter kit for listening to folklore evermore, and it's just a picture of a dictionary. They're like, Taylor, we needed to look up 300 different words.
This sort of makes me want to emphasize Japanese Breakfast's Michelle Zauner and her story of meeting Taylor Swift.
I just go, I realized I've been reading a lot of Hemingway. And in that song, Invisible String, you sing, isn't it just so pretty to think, is that a Hemingway reference? And she just goes, okay, English major.
So make of that interaction what you will. I'm sure Zauner didn't take it as a negative. And let me reemphasize, I'm not saying Taylor Swift isn't a poet. Anyone can be a poet, and Swift's songs certainly count as poetry, and I mean that genuinely. To call them just poetry kind of detracts from everything else that they are, but you can watch my song lyrics video for more on that. But how good of a poet is she? Well, like all poetry, that's up to the critics to decide. While I do think Taylor Swift is a poet, I don't know about calling her an English teacher. Ultimately, I have to agree with Majuli's conclusion. I don't know, man. I'm tired of performative intellectualism. I'm tired of anti-intellectualism. I'm tired of media illiteracy. I'm tired of book culture being squashed down to a set of cheap aesthetics ripped from a Pinterest board. I'm tired of defenders of literature, champions of debut authors, and fighters of book bans, and actual English teachers getting kicked aside to make room in the sandbox for some billionaire who wants to use big words in order to sound deep. Again, maybe you think that's too snarky or judgy or mean, and I hear you, but there's real truth at the heart of this quote. If Taylor wants us to see her as an English teacher, she should put her money where her mouth is. Majuli even suggested Swift turn her publishing company into an actual publishing company, one that could turn traditional publishing on its head. Swift has a lot of options, but right now, it doesn't really feel like she's undertaking any of them. What's funny is, Swift totally could have avoided a lot of this discourse. Not that she cares, the caption was probably an overall positive for her, and she certainly won't care about this video either. But anyway, a lot of this criticism could have been avoided if she'd just called herself a music teacher instead of an English teacher. Like, yeah, music teachers might have still caused a bit of an uproar, and I would have supported them, but it would have made more sense, no? Like, Travis's profession is athletics, and hers is music, and I didn't see a lot of people making a big deal about Travis being called a gym teacher. Well, except for this guy.
Your English teacher and your gym teacher are getting married. It's PE teacher, Taylor. Physical education. The gym is a room. You can't say gym teacher unless you are a gym teacher. That's our word. Gym teacher. That's our 2 words. Whatever, I don't do math.
But notably, this guy added,
Also, you're not an English teacher. The highest paid English teachers in the world made less in the last year than you made in the last 2 hours.
There was one more thing I wanted to note. In Majuli's post, she also mentioned the fact that English teachers help out a lot of disenfranchised students. Like, there's the whole cliche about how gay and trans students tend to really click with their English teachers. This isn't always the case, but it's a cliche for a reason. Granted, it's not just English teachers, but teachers in general, who are often bastions of support for kids who really need it. And I would imagine Taylor's songs have provided a lot of people with a lot of comfort. But this all kind of reminds me of when Jake Paul released his teacher's diss track, then an actual teacher responded. In the response, the teacher said, "I don't see Jake Paul in the hallways, I don't see him in the stands at their ball games, but I'm here like every day, bro." And in a lot of ways, I feel the Taylor situation is similar. Like, if Taylor wants to paint herself as an English teacher, then she ought to fight for the youth and the future the same way English teachers do. But maybe you think I'm making too big a deal of this whole thing. If you think I'm overreacting, let me know. If you think this discourse is silly, I for sure want to hear why. Please, tell me everything. And hey, before you go, take a look at this poem from one of my patrons, RDJVP. This piece is titled, Untitled Vignette 7. I saw the lake in my reflection. For the chance to see one of your own pieces at the end of my videos, or if you just like what I do here and want to support, consider donating to my Patreon too. For just $3 a month, you can see videos early, access the community Discord, and receive priority review for your work over on the second channel. You're seeing my patrons' names scrolling on screen right now. I genuinely can't thank them enough. If you want to support in non-monetary ways, liking, commenting, subscribing, and watching my other videos really does help. You can also follow me on my socials if you want, but no matter what, keep reading, keep writing, and ultimately, keep in mind, this is a rough draft. Probably the worst part about making this video, besides the inevitable backlash, is having You Belong With Me on loop in my head. It's not even a bad song, it's just really not a song I want stuck in my head.